Okay, cool. Awesome. Well, I don't know if anyone else is joining from the community, but that's fine. We're recording these things. Yeah, let's do some demos. Um, I could start. I'll just briefly go over a couple things. Part of this is to share with you guys, more internally. Part of this will just be like general announcements that will be in the YouTube stream. Obviously, you guys already know this, but I'll give a quick shout out to the San Francisco Bay Area FTC. The website is here at funnyinthecommons.io. It was a really awesome weekend with a lot of really cool people. You can kind of get a sense of the amazing people that we had here. A lot of diverse folks from both Web3, Web2, traditional free and open source software. The entire schedule is online, so you can take a look at these. And I think they're going to post onto the YouTube channel every single talk in case you missed it. So we should definitely take that opportunity to share this content with other people once it's on YouTube. But I think they take like a month or so to actually make that happen. So it'll take some time. But that's that. And that is cool. Yeah, thanks.
Hey, cool.
The other thing I just wanted to share real quick, it seems like, this sprint into next sprint will just be like all the things of like getting all the data sources that we want to get for retro funding 4, as well as the data pipelines for retro funding 4 and the metrics that we want to surface for voting. There's like 2 high level categories, it seems like, of things that we want to be able to get. And then some of the data that we're currently working on is not necessarily for retrofunding 4, but like in the long term, all the sorts of data that we want to be able to get. One of those things is like the lens data. I just wanted to show you what that looks like. So this is in a draft PR here.
Ray, you're still sharing the Finding the Common screen. Can you switch over to the PR, I guess, or what you wanted to show?
Are you sure? Like it when I looked at the screen,
now I have it. Okay, yeah, never mind. It's there now.
Okay.
Weird.
Cool. Anyway, so there's a PR that's like blocked by this front end error, but I can give you a sense of what the lens data looks like, just in case you guys are curious. So they have 2 tables that really matter. One is like ownership history of like they have this notion of a profile, and a profile has like a name and a bio and all sorts of stuff. And then they keep track of which EOA owns that profile, and that can change over time. So that's stored in this table. So basically, I'm tracking which owner is the latest owner, and then separately we're also fetching, names, bios, etc. And what you end up with is this table that gives you for every profile ID, their name, their bio, URLs to profile pictures, and the EUA that owns it. So when we get to building a user schema, I think the way that I'm going to translate this is, creating an EOA artifact for every single owner, and then creating a high-level user that represents this profile, basically, and we can point to the source ID so that we can do things like get, events from users, basically. So in the future, when we have multiple addresses that are attached to a particular user, we can get aggregate statistics of that user. What I think, I want to translate this to this sprint is if we get Farcaster data, we should have a similar type of profile here that represents, the user on Farcaster. And you can attach multiple addresses to a Farcaster profile. So instead of a single owner, you'll have like a couple of different artifacts, a couple of different EOA addresses, depending on how many addresses you've linked to your profile. And then similarly, we should be able to use that abstraction to do kind of like aggregations across a Farcaster user. So just like a sneak peek of what this is going to look like. I'm using Lens right now because they already have like a public data set in BigQuery, which makes it really easy. For Farcaster, we'll have to run a replicator, but it's not too bad. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that's pretty quick. Any questions about that kind of stuff?
I love this audience.
I'll take that as a no question. Oh, maybe I'll also give a quick shout out to the PGFing. Um, PGFing. So one of the things that kind of came out of funding the commons. One of the things that came out of funding the commons is, a group of people that really care about public goods funding and trying to turn this into a broader movement of people who want to find ways, like novel experiments in public goods funding, not necessarily limited to retro funding and Optimism, but and retro PGF and Filecoin, but other sorts of funding experiments that can bridge across the tech industry. And so we have this short link pgf.ing that really just redirects you to publicgoodsfunding.org. And we're basically starting a community of people that spans multiple organizations who are interested in public goods funding experiments. And I think one of the things that we're trying to expand on is turning, things like retro funding, which in my mind is basically like a profit sharing agreement, more types of profit sharing agreements that we can turn into a set of best practices that we can maybe start to approach other people in the industry with and see if it resonates anywhere else. So that's the kind of stuff that we're doing in this working group. We didn't want to make any more servers, so we're currently just have a public channel in the Discord that we're currently in. But we're also starting a newsletter, and you can follow along here. Yeah. Cool. Right.
Cool. Should I jump up next?
Go for it.
All right. Let's make sure we can. All right. Can you all see my screen? I'll take that as a yes. So a couple weeks ago, we shared our first request for impact metrics. And a lot of that was teeing up for some of the work that we would be doing with Optimism for retrofunding 4. And so since then, we've worked with them to come up with an initial set of draft impact metrics that we're looking to measure and use for retrofunding 4. So the way to think about this is there's basically two different categories. One category is around network growth. And then, there's two different axes, 4 categories in total. So you have networks versus users, or let me share the visual. You have users versus network as one axis, and then you have quality versus growth as another axis. And then you can have metrics within each of those quadrants. So for example, like growing gas fees, that would be something that's helpful for network growth, whereas something like the number of contracts that are deployed by a project, or maybe even better yet, the amount of composability that a project has with other projects, those might be measures of network quality. These are all work in progress. We're going to be improving them over time, but it's a really nice starting point to see what kind of things we might be able to model with the OSO dataset. Now, the next step in getting a production-ready set of impact metrics is this survey that we're doing together with the Optimism Collective. So it's capturing a couple pieces of information. Sorry, can you still see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, nice.
Network activity growth versus quality. That's the survey we're looking for.
Yeah, so here's like what the survey will look like. Let me zoom in a bit. So kind of first off, getting a sense, where people think we should focus. Should it be more on growth right now, more on quality? And then giving some examples of specific metrics which people can react to in terms of how important they think it might be on like a 0 to 10 scale. And then there's some free space to add other examples of projects that you think are really high impact, but might not be well represented or could touch on other impact domains. Same thing is here now for users, same types of questions, and then a few kind of general feedback questions at the end. So I won't submit it now, but we're going to be putting that out in, I think, like today, if not first thing tomorrow, and then hopefully getting some feedback. The other thing that we've been doing is trying to model some of these metrics in the data set. So actually, I'll share, this is kind of blocked right now by the current issues that we're having getting the front end to build. But this is basically a way of taking one of those metrics that we saw. So here is the contracts deployed. So I'll read this one out. The number of contracts deployed by project and its factories, it only counts contracts with at least 100 users or trusted users. So basically getting a sense for how active is the project and how many contracts are they deploying on a regular basis. Again, probably not the greatest metric, but it could be one useful indicator. And here's how we would model that. So this is what the DBT model looks like. I actually realized there's another issue here that that's an ephemeral view and won't actually work here. So I need to fix that. But here's a quick kind of version of this that I just did in BigQuery right now. So you can see that, here are the results that you get back. Again, product ID, not that exciting, but you can see a range of values from 85 all the way down to, probably 1 if we were to go all the way through. And so, that's an example of one of the impact metrics that we'll be able to create, and hopefully we'll be getting some external contributions to build that out. I think that's everything. Yeah. Well, let's cue the golf clap. I'll cue it myself. Nice. All right. And I saw that Suda joined. Hey, good to see you.
Hey guys.
Hey. Yeah, we're just like midway through the demo. But if you have questions, we can take them anytime.
Cool.
No question.
I guess awesome. I guess I'll queue my stuff up here. All right. So for this sprint, we were mostly concerned with, I think the theme was get all the datas, which so we been putting in a bunch of work to get various data sources in a variety of ways. So the first one we'll go over is really probably the simplest and maybe our most preferred method in general, except for it seems very large databases, as you'll learn in just a second. But the first one is using an Airbyte connector to actually replicate like a Postgres database. For us right now, that is by far the simplest way to integrate, assuming that, again, there's some caveats. But essentially, this sprint, we refine these documents, the documentation here, just to do the setup of a Postgres database. You create a, says my stream is ended. Is that true? You guys still there? That's probably a different stream. Oh, that's fine. Okay. So basically set up the wall for logical replication. You create a user, add that user, and then eventually submit that a read-only user to us to do replication. And then we configure that in Meltano, which is used for, and I apologize for the noise, I didn't realize that would be happening. But the Meltano connector allows for us to use Airbyte in an infrastructure as code fashion. So, and you can see in our repository, we actually have this all set up for a different user. And this is our public, so none of this will be problematic. But we're actually replicating from an ecosystem, one of their databases, and we run this every 30 minutes, and it pulls from the OST database. So that's the workflow integration. And then the warehouse itself would be right here in this Meltano setup, which there's special documentation to run this if you wanted to run it locally. And all of that's in the README here. But yeah, you would map just the databases that you would like from that system. And then we have here our BigQuery. You shouldn't have to touch any of that. But if you did want to integrate new data, you could do it straight into this file. And submitting a PR would allow us to figure out exactly how to run when to run that automation. And you can have that discussion. But yeah, that's the first one. And you can see this data available here in BigQuery. I did have this queued up. So this data is available here in BigQuery ecosystems OST. So yeah, the next
Presumably
one,
collections and projects. Sorry, presumably collections and projects mean something different in OST data.
Correct. These are exactly, yeah. So that's why it's in a separate data set. Some of this is just the way that the Meltano connectors work. We'll have to do some deeper configuration to change the rewriting. Preferably, I'd prefer to have everything in, like, at least all the sources in a single like large data set. But right now, it seems like this was just the fastest way to get this in. So, and creating data sets doesn't cost us anything, and nor does it cost anyone when they try to query this.
Yeah, I think
some of these aren't public, so yeah, and that's not anything except just some configuration on our side that we need to change. So that is not on purpose. But yeah, the next one is actually for Karma 3 data. So the next method of ingestion that we're working with is actually just going straight into S3 GCS bucket. Oh, sorry.
You mind if I ask some clarifying questions on ecosystems first?
Yeah.
Like, so this is all running in GitHub Actions. Like, how frequently is it pulling OST data now?
So it should be pulling the OST data every 30 minutes. There is a bug because some of the OST data is some of the changes in the OST data are rather massive. So the wall replication actually seems to break down at the scale at which that is creating changes. It's something like a 200 megabyte change in just like a single column or something like that. It's rather large. So the wall can't be processed by the Airbyte connector. Yeah, so those are the current limitations that we're kind of dealing with. But with smaller databases, which we haven't yet hooked up on Meltano, but we did run and test, and those have much smaller changes in general. Those will just function, and we'll pull those every 30 minutes so that we don't ever miss any so the wall actually has like a limited size, so we don't want to miss anything in the wall when we're trying to pull from that replication source.
And I know I've asked you this before, but maybe for the YouTube recording so that I never have to ask you again. is the idea that you would start running these Meltano workflows in Dagster, or will these always be like parallel pathways?
Yeah, so I think now that we have Dagster set up, which is part of the next thing, I think that I would actually start moving a lot of these data ingestion into Dagster. Dagster just gives us the flexibility of being able to conditionally load an entire branch of related things, which is not something right now. What we do in GitHub Actions, it's rather heavy-handed. We could probably still trigger certain things from GitHub Actions, and eventually it would be possible, I think, to run some of the Dagster pipelines in GitHub Actions regardless, like as an answer. But yeah, Dagster just makes things a little bit cleaner, as maybe I can illustrate in this next thing.
And And if you wouldn't mind, like, since there's some other people on the call, if you wouldn't mind just pulling up the ecosystems homepage real quick, just to
Oh
like
yeah,
share why I'm
yeah.
excited about this.
Ecosystems
Like, so
is really incredible data set. This is actually just one of the many things that. So ecosystems is run by Andrew Nesbitt, and he's created this wonderful data set of open source data. Really, just everything related to open source package information. He's got repo information, commits, and some of these are extremely large. And one of my favorites, coming from a lot of DevOps is, Docker information. He actually parses through dependencies in Docker, which is, pretty, it's pretty unique. It's not something that I've seen in a lot of other places, or really anything. I think, Andrew's it. Ecosystems is it. I think it is the holy grail of much of this open source data here. So
yeah,
yeah,
I think two of the ones on the bottom that I'm really excited about are there's a papers one, which that's actually like an issue that we filed a long time ago in the meta science thinking, is like getting dependencies between papers and software, which is going to be really cool in like the machine learning world. And then also Open Collective, right? Like a bunch of data related to funding and Open Collective. So I don't know. It's a lot of cool stuff. So TLDR is we're partnering with ecosystems to bring all of this data sets into BigQuery as public data sets that we can use with OSO in our data pipeline, but in general, like data science in general. All these data sets currently are only accessible through his API, which isn't the easiest to interact with when it comes to like machine learning and big data science. So we're excited to partner to make that easier for people.
Yeah, and we're also hoping that this can power some of the other things that we had been doing previously with like GitHub data, or sorry, Google data, like dependency mapping, reverse dependencies, etc. So this is just a plethora of incredible information here. So yeah. Yeah, so moving on, we got the Karma 3. So in figuring out, so straight to our GCS bucket dumps, preferably Parquet files. We can accept CSV files. Actually, the Karma 3 data is CSV files, but Parquet is definitely preferable. It's just, it's just a nicer format for us to deal with here. But well, I guess not really. They're kind of equivalent, but there's less type, less worrying about certain type information, or ambiguities. Excuse me. So yeah, so the Karma 3 data is actually already being ingested. You won't see it in this Dagster instance because this Dagster instance is rather new, so it doesn't actually have the previous runs of those assets. But Dagster, what it does is it organizes everything as what it calls software-defined assets, so data assets. So these things here, so Karma Global Trust, Karma Global Config, all of this is actually configured, and this PR is still open because of, again, build issues that we're having. I can actually show exactly, at least, how this is working right now and give maybe a vision on how I would prefer for this to work in the future. But all it is you just give it a configuration, and all of the rest of the configuration for Karma 3 is generated. So, or sorry, the rest of the assets, the cleanup, like all the jobs related to cleaning up, all the S3 ingest, all of that is all contained by just instantiating this internal or interval GCS import asset. Maybe not the sexiest name, but yeah. And then what you can do from there is, and I don't want to mess with this right now because it's doing a rather heavy lift on something else that I'll talk about, but you just hit materialize, and then this would automatically populate into the OSO sources. So this is a new data set. Also needs to be configured for public, but it is, this is actually the daily dump, or a daily updated table of the Karma 3 data. So yeah, it is all available here. One thing that we would like to provide soon, and hopefully I'll get to work with the Karma 3 folks to do this, but the all of the field names and all of this, and maybe some example queries, because I actually haven't dove into this. I've only parsed the CSV files and or loaded the CSV files. I didn't even parse them. So Google did all of that. So, but for now, this is synchronized every day.
Cool.
Yeah, and then
maybe some background for people, like if they don't know what Karma 3 is. Like Karma 3 is the team behind Eigentrust. So they're basically applying the Eigentrust algorithm over different graphs. And so I believe this is for Farcaster graph, right? But they have a way to basically from any particular graph generate user reputations. So is that right? This should only be for Farcaster.
I am not actually certain. I know that there was a configuration here, but the configuration wasn't exactly clear to me what this was. So pre-choice off. Yeah, not certain. Yeah, I think it is based on this. Yeah. So
how do I is there a column for the Farcaster ID?
So this is one of the reasons why I think, especially, I know that you're going to meet up with the Karma 3 folks. I would love it to understand exactly how all of these tables relate. They're just dumping the data right now, and I don't actually know how things are properly relating, because local trust and global trust, those names, those words make sense, but specifically what it means is not yet clear to me. But I trust that this data is useful.
Okay, yeah, I say what that means. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, sorry, it might be my connection, just because I had to hop on mobile Wi-Fi. So yeah. Sorry, did you ask a question?
Just have no idea what these mean. Like
basically I have no idea what these mean.
Like at the end of the day, I need to know when you're doing this global trust thing, what links to what. I'm gonna assume for now I is the Farcaster ID and V is the trust value or something like that. That's my guess, but I guess I could ask them on Wednesday.
Cool. I think we need better docs on what exactly these all mean. When I saw the column name was I and V, I was not super excited about that, but yeah. Cool. So yeah, that's the Karma 3 data, and again, we're working constantly to refine these things, but now at this point, these are fully ingested every day. This is something that is a repeatable asset now, or an asset class, I should say, I guess, of data. And so next, the last big one, oh, sorry, what?
One more question I had about Daxter. Like, how much of these Daxter configs are like basically infrastructure as code, and it's like somewhere in our mono repo, like how to configure each of these assets, versus like things that you have to manually configure in the.
So far everything is 100% infrastructure as code. Yeah, which is pretty cool.
Pretty much you're pretty much only using the UI to monitor progress and trigger syncs and materializations, and you're never really using. Like it's just for like the UX is just for monitoring, basically, right? It's not
correct. Yeah, it's exactly. So conceivably we could actually run this statelessly, and not maintain any history if we just knew the things that we wanted to maintain. The only real reason, So I should caveat, when I say everything's infrastructure as code, the server running this right now is not. That was hackily put together so that I could get the traces data all ingested without without a massive egress tax on pulling that data down for the deduplication purpose.
I mean, part of the reason why I ask is like this, this URL, daxter.opensource.observer, like, can we make that available to the public so they can like actually monitor the progress of any particular run?
That's something I don't know yet. I haven't looked into what the user profile could be. There is no login for me. It just kind of gets me in there. So I imagine there's an authentication process, but I don't know of it yet. So I'm still rather new to Daxter.
Yeah. Hey guys, just want to be mindful of time. We're kind of coming up on I think we're over time now, right?
Shoot. Okay, yeah.
Why don't we just take a minute?
So the last last thing is really just the traces data. So this is probably, this one of the things that we've been trying to get, closer to us over the longest period. So the traces data currently is, you can actually see all of the files being like ingested into the system here. And eventually they will get into the BigQuery OSO. So currently they go to raw sources, and then from here they're merged. Each one of these worker plots. This is how GoldSky works. Each of them runs a different worker. So the raw sources data, which isn't something that it'll be public, but it's not intended to be used publicly. It'll get cleaned up a bit and then moved into OSO sources. So these are intended to be temporary data sources or data tables, or ephemeral, I should say, because we'll do some cleanup of those periodically. But and that should be all the traces data. Once this very large backfill completes.
Do you have a branch or PR where you can show like what the configuration for the GoldSky stuff looks like?
Oh God, I do, and it needs a little bit of cleanup, but I can show you because I actually had to push to this branch constantly. Okay. All right. So what does this look like? Okay. So part of it, actually, we use DuckDB to do some of the deduplication. So we actually load directly from the Parquet files, do a bunch of merging of that data, dedupe, and then put that back into GCS as fully deduped. And then once it gets up there, we can just easily merge directly into the database as is. This is part of that GoldSky setup, and then the assets themselves are configured. Oh God, you're gonna see how awful this is. So it's configured right here for right now. But this is the part that I'm going to the to do on this, which is to turn this into just configuration, so it doesn't have to be manually configured. Basically, this section right here. If I just rip that out and then move that to a different place, that this can just be automatically generated for every GoldSky source. But for testing purposes, I just threw it in there.
I saw Jade joined. Thanks for joining, guys. Don't want to hog all the questions. Pseudo or Jade, did you guys have any questions?
None on my end. I just wanted to jump in, say hi, and learn a little bit more.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for coming, Jade.
Cool.
And Pseudo, I know that you sent me a DM actually, and we're interested in data integrations. And I'm curious if any of the stuff that we shared was what you had in mind or is the type of thing that you're looking for. But you might be on mute now, so if you don't want to speak, we can catch up later.
We
Yeah,
love
think
data.
Nice. Well, the only other thing I guess we can plug is that Gitcoin Grants Round 20 just opened up. Open Source Observer is one of the projects in the developer tooling round. We are also live on Octant right now for another week. So if you are a Octant allocator, please consider giving some of your allocation to Open Source Observer. And I think that's it. Should we give it a wrap?
Sounds good.
Yeah. Unless there's other people that want. If there's anyone else that wanted to ask questions, happy to. Yeah, I think my intention for these is like, we can what am I trying to say? We can figure out how we want to structure these things in the future. I wouldn't want it to be like 30 minutes of us talking at people, especially since like, no offense, Ruben, like some of the things I followed, but some of the things I didn't necessarily follow. And if that's the case for me, I imagine that's the case for like everybody. So I think it actually is like, it doesn't necessarily make sense to do these things in a non-interactive way, because like, I think interaction like
is the way that we're going to get. Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah.
I see Abel just joined as well. Curious, Abel, if you missed the Q&A, but it's good to see you here. Did you want to stop in and say hi?
Yeah, I just thought I'd come and say hi. I saw this as a notification. I arrived a bit late, so yeah, as I said, I missed a bit of it. But yeah, just curious, coming to say hi. Yeah, this is cool.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, is this recorded?
There's a recording that will be published soon. So if you want to see anything there, I can also give you a quick download later.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Sweet. Yeah, should we wrap up the demo for this week? Ray, that good with you?
Sure. Yeah, if no one else has questions, we can take it offline.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great week.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.
Yeah.